Please welcome Ambassador Espinosa and Cabinet Secretary McAllan.
I should say, Ambassador Espinosa, I was just saying to you when we were having a quick chat before coming in that we actually met for the first time at New York Climate Week, and I was surprised that you remembered because it was a bit of a fangirl moment for me where I just sort of ran up and said hello and how much I admired all of your work. But it was such a pleasure to meet you then, and it's a huge privilege to share the stage with you now and to have this discussion with everyone who's come along to hear from you. I suppose when I was preparing to come along tonight, one of the first things that occurred to me is that tomorrow will be 1 week since I was sworn in as the Cabinet Secretary for Net Zero and Just Transition in Scotland. And although I've sort of been working on climate and environment in a number of ways for a few years, that really is a very different story to your own, with a very long and distinguished career in foreign service and in international climate advocacy. So I suppose maybe just to kick us off, here's me coming into this position. That's a symbol, I think, of how much climate change is now right at the front of political discourse, public consciousness, and there is, I think, except from in some small areas, an acceptance that it's work we need to do. That hasn't always been the case. So I wonder if you have any reflections from some of the really early work that you did. You will have faced skepticism about the scale of the issue, and maybe some of how you overcame that, and what maybe were the big moments where you feel that was overcome.
Thank you very much. And I do want to share with all of you that I really feel privileged to be here tonight with Cabinet Secretary McAllan, because I am convinced that the world needs young leaders that are willing to give all their energy and commitment for the best causes of humanity. And I think you are really a great example of that, accepting to take up this very huge challenge of driving the net zero agenda of your beautiful country is not a minor endeavor. I do want to wish you well, and I do want to express all my support in any way that I could be useful to you.
Thank you.
Let me say, and maybe you will allow me to share some personal experiences that I would think that illustrate very well how the issue of climate change has evolved. I am a Mexican diplomat, started my diplomatic career in 1981. It's a long time ago. And then as a diplomat from a developing country, I was always very much involved on issues related to the challenges of development, the challenges of inequality, the challenges of poverty, challenges about the human rights of people. So I was very fortunate because I was given that opportunity to develop my skills in that setting, and it was, I can just share with you. I remember my first years as a Mexican representative, young diplomat in Geneva, sitting in those meeting rooms and just listening to everybody around. And then I started to understand, okay, by every statement that every representative was making, you were kind of having a little window to the reality of that country. So this is really just an amazing personal experience beyond the fact that it provides you with this incredible amount of not only of information, but only about the vision of so many different cultures. But now going to climate change. In 2007, I was in 2006, I was appointed the foreign minister of Mexico. And as in that position, I was always traveling with the president to all the different international commitments, bilateral and multilateral. And the president, my boss, he was really passionate about environmental issues and climate change. So he had accepted that Mexico would be hosting the conference of the parties to the Convention on Climate Change in 2010 in Mexico. So that was the reason why he went to the previous conference, because it was expected at the end of the conference a decision would be made that we would then become the incoming presidency. And he wanted to be there just to express how much commitment he had. We came there, that COP15 was held in Copenhagen in 2009. We came there and we found ourselves in a very, very difficult situation in terms of the negotiations going on. There had been a lot of really very bad confrontations between different countries and within different delegations, and therefore the Prime Minister of Denmark had convened in a small room a small group of leaders in order to discuss the possible outcome for the conference. We spent hours and hours and hours there, and this was really very, very unique. I have to say, in my 40-something years of diplomatic experience, I have never been in such a situation again. Because normally, as you can imagine, the negotiations are made by the people at the more technical level. Yes, with political guidance, but at the technical level. And when the presidents come, when the heads of state come, that's the moment where things are already well put together. That was not the case here. Unfortunately, the conference ended with no agreement. And it not only ended with a lack of agreement, but also an incredible division, basically between the developed world and the developing world. Why? Because the developing world felt that they were being pushed to take up commitments that would represent a big sacrifice in their development goals, and were not getting enough support. I was terrified, I can tell you. I was sitting in that room with the president and just thinking, oh my God, next year we will have this meeting in Mexico. How are we going to restore a trusted atmosphere so that we can deliver some kind of an outcome? And we left with that concern. As a foreign minister, then I decided immediately I will need to work to try to restore that trust. And basically what I dedicated the whole year was to travel the world and to listen to everyone. Because the main reason why there was this confrontation and this division was a lack of dialogue. Mm. It was a lack of dialogue. The fact that many felt that they were not being listened to, that their concerns were not really taken on board. So I traveled and I was meeting with the ministers, and little by little, we managed to restore trust, to get what I would say, and I was always saying, we need to have, a critical mass of support for progress. What were my arguments? My arguments were, if we don't make progress, we all will be losing. There's no doubt about that, right? So the only thing that is certain is that if we do not get to agreements, all of our societies, all of our countries will be losing. And well, that I think that worked. What worked also was the fact that we managed to put together a scheme where developed countries did commit to provide more support, especially financial support to developing countries. And everybody agreed, yes, we will make our share, but there are different types of responsibilities. Why? Because developed countries had the opportunity to develop their economies with an unrestricted use of resources. And what we are now asking of everyone, or what we need to ask of everyone, is to put limits to that use of the resources. So this was really the atmosphere. At that time, it was, you know, there were some very big and important developing countries that were really not convinced that they should be taking up more commitments. For example, I traveled at least 3 times that year to China. I traveled 2 times to India. I went to Egypt, and it was really just putting forward the reasons. This is why I really would like to say that, in my view, dialogue is the best tool for any process where you have differences of opinions. Dialogue, respectful dialogue, I would say, maybe is really the key. At the end of COP16, we managed to get this agreement on what we call the Cancun agreements, where we had we included the decision that of the mobilization of $100 billion by developed countries to support the effort of developing countries, but also one point that was included in those agreements was that by 2015, we should have concluded an agreement that would put forward the different commitments by all countries, so that everybody would be putting would be contributing to combating climate change. So that was really, you know, a very difficult moment. Mm-hmm. If I think about that, I would say that what we have seen until the Paris Agreement was really a process where this trust was maintained, yeah. And then it came to a very good and successful outcome with the Paris Agreement. In my view, the Paris Agreement is one of the most important results of multilateralism. Yeah. An incredible example. Now, we are today in the phase of implementation. Also, looking back, 2010, in terms of public opinion, very few people knew what we were talking about. And this is only, you know, it's not such a long time ago. And if you think about the fact that the convention was adopted 30 years ago, more than 30 years ago, which means we have known for over 30 years about this huge problem. And today, while we are so much more conscious and we have the solutions, we have the means to address it, we're still not acting at the pace and you know, with the determination that is needed.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for that. And I think that makes clear just the incredible amount of groundwork that was done by you, your colleagues, by campaigners, by people right around the world to get us, I think, right up to that point, that seminal moment, I think, of Paris, which, you know, probably the most substantial point at which the scale of the crisis, I think, was made clear, but also the tangible actions that were incumbent on states to undertake to tackle it. And certainly, from a domestic perspective, Paris has shaped what we have tried to do in Scotland ever since. So, our climate targets are based on, if not trying to be even stricter than what Paris demands of us. And of course, the climate emergency that was declared in Scotland. And sometimes these things can feel a little bit abstract, but they definitely do change the way that things happen in government and therefore in our economy and therefore in our society. But I suppose your reflections then maybe on I know you came in to your role as the Executive Secretary at the UNFCCC about a year after the Paris Agreement. It must have been a frenetic time, just with so much going on, trying to bring it to life. If you could share any of your experiences of that with us, I think that would be wonderful. But then equally, maybe looking forward, we've just recently had the latest synthesis report of the IPCC, and we have Antonio Guterres with increasingly stark warnings, code red. Did you think then that we would be in this position now? And then maybe we can think about some of what we need to do to try and keep Paris alive.
Well, it has been, yes, indeed, it has been really challenging since the Paris Agreement was adopted. And yes, it was adopted in December 2015, and I came into my role as the head of the UN Climate Change Secretariat in July 2016, just a few months before COP22, which was held in Marrakesh in Morocco. And there was first a sense of momentum because the Paris Agreement entered into force in less than 1 year. The required ratifications were put together so that it could enter into force as soon as possible. And I think that was really a very important element for what we have seen until today from Paris. Sorry, you still can hear me, right? Okay. So it was great challenge even for colleagues in the Secretariat. They were worried about, how are we going to organize the first conference on the parties to the Paris Agreement in just a few weeks. And, I said, well, I'd rather have this challenge than the challenge of not even knowing when the Paris Agreement is going to be entering into force. So at the same time, if you remember, in December 2016, President Donald Trump was elected in the U.S., and that was just at the very beginning of COP22. So you can imagine how much that influenced in the overall atmosphere in the conference. It was a very difficult moment to still, go on, do the conference, finalize, make some progress, act on the Paris Agreement, and just try to set a road into the future. While we all already knew that it was his intention to withdraw from Paris as soon as possible. The Paris Agreement establishes that if you are a party, you have to give formal notice of your intention to withdraw, and that withdrawal can only take effect 1 year later. So it was not immediate, right? But of course, I would say that the most important effect of the withdrawal of the US was a lack of leadership. Lack of ambition, and we then dedicated ourselves to work on the different tools that would make the Paris Agreement fully operational. Because the agreement is a general framework. It says, for example, that countries should provide information on certain issues, but it doesn't say exactly what information and how it should be presented, etc. So that was the part that we needed to work on, and we dedicated ourselves to that. I put emphasis also in bringing into the Paris Agreement some countries that had not yet joined, and I have to say I was very happy to see that we were successful. And the fears or the speculation that we had heard about others following the example of the US did not materialize. On the contrary, we got more and more and more countries coming into the Paris Agreement, which is today probably the most universal multilateral agreement that exists. Later on we had the problem of the pandemic. Mm-hmm. Well, negotiations normally are by definition in person, right? But we manage also to maintain the process going. So looking into the future, I think this is now the moment where we need to really concentrate on the implementation, the actions. And the actions don't take place in the conference. The actions take place in the communities, in the cities, in the businesses, in the organizations, in entities everywhere around the world. So this is the moment where I would say we need to concentrate on that. And it is difficult, yes, of course it is difficult. And I think it's a human condition that we need to accept. We all experience a certain fear of the unknown or fear of change because we don't know what is going to come. But in today's moment, the problem is that what we do know, what we are certain of, is that if we do not change, we will be facing an increasingly more difficult and harmful situation everywhere. So we have no option. Our option is change. And the good thing is we have a lot of solutions. We have the resources. We have the ingenuity. Humanity has been able to overcome so many just incredible challenges. Take the example of the eradication of polio. Take the example of so many. Even going to the moon. Take the example of so many things that have happened in just this short time. As Simon was saying, that we humans have been here in planet Earth. So I think this is really the time of action. And why am I really optimistic? I am optimistic because I see a lot of people passionate about it, but I am also optimistic because I see so many young people really willing to engage and really willing to take part of that transformation. So going into the future, Cabinet Secretary, I think it's really action, 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 getting everyone to act. I do want to say that I admire very much what Scotland has put forward in terms of ambitious goals. I hope that other countries and regions and cities and other places in the world could follow your example, and I also hope that you will be able to support others in moving forward.
No, absolutely, and thank you very much for that. I think you're absolutely right, because the way I often think of it is we have to do what we can domestically, but we have to recognise our role in the wider world, be that cooperating and sharing with others what we've done, what's worked, what hasn't worked, so that they can avoid maybe doing what didn't work. And I think that cooperation is absolutely key, because we just do not have time not to work together and try and shortcut some of those problems. So we'll certainly keep trying to do that. One of the maybe last things that I wanted to touch on before we move to audience questions was just that point about the interconnectivity of Scotland's, we have our domestic targets. We're trying to play a helpful role in the world as well. So I just wanted to ask you about the issue of climate justice. You mentioned you're having come from a developing country and the perspective that that gave you. Do you think right now, as all countries work, some more than others, to do what they can in the domestic sphere, is there enough focus, particularly from the global north, on what is that moral obligation to the global south, who have done very little to cause climate change, but who right now are on the front line of it, as we see, a third of Pakistan submerged underwater, people starving across the Horn of Africa. Are we there yet with the recognition of that?
Unfortunately, I have to be, very, very blunt in saying we are not there. Yeah. We are not there, and we are really not there by far. I mean, if we look at the what has happened regarding the support that developing countries expect under this climate regime, which by the way is different from other types of what we normally call development assistance, because development assistance is a concept that intends to help others in their efforts. Now, when we talk about the obligations under the climate regime, it's obligations for everyone. Why? Because there are some that have a bigger responsibility in the problem, and therefore, this is why they are obliged to provide support to the others. And why is that so important? Because regardless of what you do in one place, if we do not manage to get this climate crisis addressed everywhere in the world, the efforts we make in one place, for example, Scotland, will be undermined what is going to be happening in other places in the world. So I have been really very much concerned by the fact that many African countries that are rich in fossil fuel resources have been really expressing in very clear terms that they do not want to be deprived of their right to benefit from those resources. But what does that mean? It's not only that it will affect them, because the atmosphere recognizes no boundaries, right? So climate change does not recognize boundaries. So if we do not provide them with the support and means for the alternatives, I'm afraid they will go in that direction. So this is one of the moments, I would say, in the history of humanity, where we need to recognize that if we do not work together, it's going to be failure for everyone. And that at the same time, we do know exactly what we need to do. And we do have the technological solutions, not all of them, but many. I mean, if we, and we know how it is with technology. The more you deploy technology, then that becomes really an incentive for technology to be developed further. And we can see a cycle that just accelerates. So if we do not do this massive deployment of clean technologies, which implies not only bringing the technology, but also working together with those communities, with those countries, with those governments, in order to be able, in order for them to be able to manage this very radical and structural change. So yes, definitely international cooperation is absolutely key. And I hope that we can really start recognizing it as an enlightened investment in our future, and not so much, you know, a way of giving away and helping others.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I was just, quite right, yeah. I was just noting down some of what you said there. Climate change recognises no boundaries, and if we don't work together, it will be failure for everyone. I think that's a perfect note on which to end this section of tonight. Thank you so much for sharing your insights with us, Ambassador.
Thank you, Màiri. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you both. Wonderful start to the evening. The questions are pouring in. If you haven't poured yours in yet, there's a QR code that periodically appears here but appears elsewhere. There are a lot of questions, so I'm going to urge you to give us short answers where you're able to. The first, the most popular question relates to capitalism. Is there a fundamental mismatch between our pursuit of capitalism and our success in meeting our climate change goals? If there is, what do we need to change about the way we run the world's economy to make it more possible? Màiri, there we go.
Yeah, I'm happy to kick off.
Less than a week in the job.
I know.
And we give you
Tackling
global
capitalism after 6 days. Do I think they are fundamentally opposed to one another, capitalism and solving the climate crisis? In truth, no. At its core, no. And I would explain that just by pointing to some of what the ambassador was saying laterally there about the importance of, Patricia, was saying about the importance of technology and innovation and all of these matters that are going to, I'm hoping, are going to drive us forward as we try to tackle climate change. And we require the big players in the corporate world, in commerce, in business, to be on board with that if we are to make the progress at the pace and scale that is required, you know, commensurate with the challenge of climate change, I think. But that's not wholehearted, you know, that some of it has to be tempered, but I think we need everybody on board.
Thank you. Patricia?
Well, I would agree with the comment by Màiri that it's not incompatible. We need to create some wealth in order to be able to distribute it. We need to create the solutions. We need to incorporate, because that's really the truth. We need to fulfill the expectations and needs of so many million people around the world that are not cannot benefit from electricity and health and sanitation and all of that. At the same time, I would say that we need to work on the role of governments in defining policies for these actions that need to happen to really become a reality and to accelerate. I think that's something that you know, sometimes we think about capitalism as opposed to some kind of government intervention or government guidance. I do believe that in this regard, we need the intervention of governments, which by the way is at all levels and also includes parliaments, to create the incentives and create the frameworks that are needed to accelerate this change. That's one thing. Another comment I would like to make, and I make it short, is that I think we need to reevaluate our concept of value. What's the value of a glass of clean water, right? Or clean air, or our children or grandchildren being able to go outside and play soccer.
Yeah.
That has a value. We need to give value to those things.
Thank you. Okay, so capitalism survives, right? The next question is an interesting question. It compares the climate crisis to COVID. So we all recognize that COVID caused a step change in activity, and a sense of urgency, determination, and man, did it get our attention. You know, why can we not behave in the same way about climate change?
I think in some ways we can. And I think we have to learn the lessons of the speed with which, as Patricia says, what governments do is really important, and the speed with which governments were prepared to act in the face of a pandemic emergency. I think we have to learn from that. I think in some ways the pandemic was a setback to the march of climate progress, because it is something which consumes people's lives and detracts from their ability to focus on something like the climate emergency. If you're trying to stay healthy and stay alive, it takes people's focus away from climate change. And I think we need to accept that as we move through the next 2 decades, into 2045, 2050, and thereafter, we will never be doing this in a vacuum. We will always be doing it with the normal day-to-day changes that bear down on people's lives, and we have to try and guide them through that. It also helped us, because I think it spoke to that point that Patricia made latterly about the interdependency of the world. We saw in the pandemic how interconnected the world was, and I think that parallel with the pandemic and with the climate emergency and everything that comes with warming that's now predicted is learning that we can keep learning, learning that we can take forward.
Okay. Thank you. Patricia?
Well, I fully endorse what Màiri has said. I think that it would be a pity if we do not really take advantage of those lessons. And if we even already, for example, take into account that currently there are more children that are dying from diseases that derive from air pollution than of any other illness in the world. So we can already see that these damages are happening, and that for innovation, we can also cooperate and collaborate. I do think we need to also learn from that experience in order to make things more just. Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. There's a question here about the oil and gas sector. I'm going to add a little bit to the question. The question, as it's just come in, is really how do we stand half a chance in meeting climate change objectives when it seems, and this is referencing Scotland, we don't even seem able to stop the development of new oil fields in the North Sea. But to sort of broaden it out, what perhaps when we come to you, Patricia, what role do you see the oil and gas sector and the relationship between them and the multilateral agreements, which at the moment I think don't say very much that's terribly specific about how they should behave?
Yeah. Well, I think it is very clear. I mean, it's true that in the Paris Agreement and in the decisions that are taken at the conference, there is not as much of a reference to the role of the oil and gas on the specifically to the phasing out of oil and gas or phasing out of fossil fuels altogether, as we need, really. But what I would underline is all the scientific reports, the many scientific reports, all of them are very clear about the fact that emissions coming from fossil fuels are at the heart of the climate emergency. So I think there is really a very clear basis to say that there is a responsibility. Now, I am a person that believes firmly in the power of dialogue. And so I do believe that we need to have really dialogue also with those, with that sector and hold them accountable. I think what we are now seeing sometimes these the views of some that feel that they should not be participating at all in the conversations. I do understand them. I know where they are coming from, but at the same time, I think that if we cannot bring on board the oil and gas sector, we will not be able to achieve our goals by the end of the century. And at the same time, I also think that it's important to recognize that in that industry, in those industries, from them depend millions of people around the world. People that are, their livelihoods are based there. We need to bring them on board. We need to see how we can support them, how we can, whether we can retrain them, there are some very good examples, for example, of phasing out of coal and what kind of frameworks have been put together. It's not easy, but I do believe that it can be done. And the facts are so clear that I really believe that there is no way that anybody can say they don't have a responsibility.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So we're an oil nation.
Yes. No, and I would agree with what Patricia was saying there. I think on the international stage, we had at COP26 the commitment in the final moments that was changed from phasing out coal, it was changed to phasing down. It was a real disappointment for everyone, and I really hope that in future years we'll see that agreement in the multinational space. Domestically, I think two things are true for us in Scotland. One is that oil and gas has been and currently continues to be important for our economy, communities, workers, and our energy security. But the other thing that is absolutely true is that the ongoing unlimited extraction of hydrocarbons is completely incompatible with our climate ambitions. And those two things being true together means that we need to have the quickest possible transition away from oil and gas in a way that is fair, that doesn't do to oil and gas workers what was done to coal and steel workers in the 70s and 80s, where people were left on the scrap heap. I represent an area in Lanarkshire where there are still communities that are economically dislocated because it happened too quickly. So it's incumbent on us to plan that just and fair transition away from oil and gas, which is cognizant of workers and communities, which thinks about energy security and plans our way out of reliance on oil and gas into renewables, which we're actually really lucky to have an abundance of potential in, and also which is mindful of carbon leakage and making sure that we don't end up importing what we stop producing here. But that has to happen as quickly as we possibly can.
Okay, thank you. There's a pithier and more direct version of the same question that's come in. Would either of you say that the UK government should cease all new licensing or granting of licenses for coal extraction, gas extraction, and oil new ones, not closing the existing ones, but the new ones? Do you want to answer that question, or would you rather not?
No, I mean, I'm happy to. I think it's well, what we've said is that everything should have a climate compatible. I mean, first of all, I should say it's a real frustration of mine that we don't have control over these resources in Scotland, but maybe we'll leave that debate for another day. But we have said, adding into everything that I've already said about the fair and just transition, because I do genuinely believe in that, but we should have a climate compatibility test which is aligned with the Paris Agreement on any new, but it's difficult for me to answer because I'm not involved in it, but that's a frustration of mine.
Okay, Patricia, a different version of the question for you, because I'm forgiven for not knowing everything about the UK oil and gas sector. Has any country in the world made that decision? Has any country in the world that has substantial fossil fuel resources said, that's it, no more?
I'm not aware of any country in that has made this kind of commitment. And I think what I would say, and I really agreeing fully with Màiri, is that every country needs to have a credible and well-established plan on energy transition. And that is the point. And a plan that really is ambitious, that makes this transformation as fast as possible. And you know, it's not a transformation that can happen from one day to the other. I'm clear about that. But at the same time, and it's also, by the way, a transformation that I think offers a lot of opportunities for these companies that have been, I mean, they have been at the forefront of innovation, of creating value, of, you know, they are such efficient business. They know how to do business, how to do things, how to deliver. So I don't see why they would not be able to make good business with, you know, the new energy sources. And what we really need is those plans. And by the way, it's not also an issue that fossil fuels will not be needed. They hopefully will not be used as a source of energy, but there will be some uses that will still be there. And look at what we, in the other day I was reading in the medical services. So much plastic is used. Why? But it's really, so far we don't have an alternative to make sure that we are going to really look for the safety and the health of patients. So do we want to go back to other types of medical appliances? I don't know, you know, I don't know what that will be. So there is really a lot of uses that, as of today, we will still need those as the fossil fuels as raw materials.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to change the subject now to that of protest. There's a question in here about the role of protest. It says radical protest. I don't know what sort that is. Maybe we're talking about the sort of the more demonstrative types. What do you think the role, both of your views, are the role of protest in accelerating change or in the whole dialogue?
I do think it has been a very important contribution. I think that the voice of society has to be heard, and I do know that there are some contexts where people get very frustrated and they need to channel that frustration. I would would argue for also for, you know, as much as possible to avoid, of course, violence and, you know, some excess in these protests. But the voices need to be heard. And they have an incredibly important role to play. Look at at Greta and the whole movement that she has started, a lot of it. And maybe one comment I would make, I hope that we could hear more in the global north of what is happening in that sense in the south, because there are lots of things going on, especially led by young people that we are not hearing about, and if they can join forces, they will become really very, very powerful.
No, I would agree with what Patricia was saying there, especially the point, just the very simple point, that people have to be heard. And I think too often in, be it government processes or international processes, women, young people, and people from the global south are just far too infrequently heard. And therefore, protest is a really important outlet. People ask me quite a lot when there's, I don't know, roads being held up or whatever, do you condone this? And I would always say that protesters should keep themselves safe and they should keep others safe, but that they should absolutely make their voices heard. And it's often said, well, do you not think this is extreme? And I would say, well, you know, we just talked about it, a third of Pakistan being underwater is extreme. Millions of people facing famine and starvation across the Horn of Africa is extreme. You know, we have to have a way of demonstrating how seriously this issue has to be taken.
Thank you both for your answers there. The next most popular question is about the far right.
Oh my goodness.
Should we be worried about the rise? I don't think either of you are cast in this role, but should we be worried about the rise of the far right movements across the world and their links to the sort of the conspiracy theories related to climate change? So are governments around the world that, as they drift to the right, going to care less and less about climate change? Patricia, let's have an international perspective first.
Well, you know, I think what is absolutely crucial is that we make efforts to try to ensure that that really credible information and real information is brought to the people. And I mean, I think that it should not be, regarding climate change, it should not be, I don't see it as a political agenda for right or left or center. I just really think that what the message that we need to get across is that this is a survival issue for humanity. And in that regard, yeah, I think that we really need to make a lot of efforts because there is so much misinformation about climate change and other issues as well. But in general, right, misinformation is just a big problem, in my view, in our society. And probably it is partially also at the center of this very big division in societies that we are seeing in so many countries in the world.
Yeah, I know I would just endorse that. Misinformation was the word that I had scribbled down there. I think that Patricia's right, it's that this transcends left and right ideology. It is about, I think as it was put, you know, survival guide for life on Earth. We just, from my perspective and from my politics, we just have to defeat right-wing ideology democratically and do it through the ballot box. But misinformation is something more insidious, I think, because I don't believe we have tackled it yet as a society. And that gets into lots about online and social media and the spread of misinformation. And I do think that is tainting political discourse across the world just now. And I don't think we have met that challenge yet.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to squeeze 2 more questions in. We will be quick. So many people have generously offered to hear from you what you would urge them to do. When they walk out the door tonight, what should they do to make a difference? Is that too big a question?
No, I can sort of kick that one off. There's things that all of us can do in our own lives, be it changing the way that we travel, trying to change the way that we heat and cool our homes, what we consume. We all have power in that regard, and we should all do our bit. But I actually feel quite strongly that the weight of this and the enormity of the climate challenge and the nature crisis as well, which we haven't really touched on, but which is completely interconnected, it shouldn't really fall to the individual. It can't fall to the individual. I think governments and business and organisations have to lead the way and create the circumstances that makes it easier for people to do the right thing. We should try and do the right thing, but recognising that it's not easy for everybody, and we rely on the power brokers to set the climate for us to do it in.
Thank you. Patricia?
Well, are you ready for a long list of homework? No, I completely agree with the cabinet secretary what she has said. One point that I would make is, talk to your friends, to your family, to everybody about the issue. This is also a way of addressing this misinformation and this problem. Talk to the children about it in a positive way. I don't think, and I think here this is an important point. There are now in some reports that are talking about the anxiety among young people and mental health problems derived from the fact that they see their future being compromised in a very serious way. I think these are issues that we need to take seriously, that we really need to address. If you see somebody really getting anxious and nervous about it, we need to see that they get help. But we should be talking about this as an agenda of opportunity, an opportunity to build a more sustainable, healthier, better future for this generation and the generations to come. And yes, individuals have the power of their vote in order to influence the big changes that they want to see, request from their representatives in government that what they really are looking for, making campaigns and raising their voices about these concerns. And then individuals also have the big power of their money, right? As consumers, as people that make choices that are influencing also the way the industry works. Look at the change that has happened in very, very short times, a very short period of time regarding, for example, plastic. In so many places, just, it's banned. Yeah, okay, no more plastic. It is possible. You can do it. All institutions can do it. all businesses, all universities, everybody can do those things. And that, if we add up all of that, it's a big contribution.
Okay, thank you. There you go. Got your homework. Final question. This is a lovely question, actually. You've both sort of committed your lives at the moment to working on climate change. What gives you the greatest feeling of hope that progress will be made in time? Patricia.
I think, I mean, I do, maybe I go back to one of the comments I made before. I think humanity has overcome so many just incredible challenges in the past. I think the fact that we do have such an incredible amount of solutions available, that we actually do, as a whole, do have the resources to make it happen. So, you know, I do think that the conditions are there. I think we are in dire need of leaders, of leadership around the world. But you know, when I go to different places, including here, I see leaders, right? And so I you know, that makes me really optimistic and hopeful.
Okay, that's nice. So it's possible. So if we don't do it, it's only because we choose not to do it.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Màiri?
No, I agree with that entirely. It's possible, the conditions are there, technology's there, the IPCC has told us there's enough global finance to do what we need to do. So all of that gives me hope. I think also the fact that there's so much opportunity in it. So it's not just that it's possible, but it's that if we do it and we do it correctly, including via that just transition and with a justice lens on internationally as well, that there is massive opportunity. I mean, we can, for example, in Scotland, build a future green well-being economy based on our renewable resources and based on an economy which says, yes, we need economic growth in order to redistribute it, but the value of our healthy environment and places for people to spend time and clean air to breathe. These are all things that people, every single person, who, no matter who you are, can benefit from, and they are all good things that will come alongside tackling the climate emergency. So it's possible, and there is opportunity in it.
Well, good. I can't think of a better way of ending. And please give a very warm hand of applause to Patricia Espinosa and Màiri McAllan.